Everyone needs compassion, love that's never failing. Let mercy fall on me.
My dad's birthday was on October 14th. He would have been 88. And on my dad's 80th birthday, if you remember, we had my mother's funeral. And then today's my birthday. And I got to tell you, it's funny how, things change. October used to be my favorite month of the year. and now I'd say it's my least favorite. Last year, most of our family was able to go to Coleman to celebrate my dad's birthday. But this year's been different. And I've obviously been thinking a lot about my dad. He passed away August 1st, so I thought the best way to celebrate his birthday is to do this lesson. Actually, this lesson, I don't know how many of you remember 10 years ago, but on Father's Day, I actually preached very similar to this. There's definitely some revisions to this today. So bear with me in my thoughts of what all my dad taught me. At 4 years old, my dad could do anything. At 10 years old, my dad doesn't know exactly everything. At 14 years old, don't pay attention to Dad, he's old-fashioned. At 21, Dad is hopelessly out of date. At 25, Dad knows a little bit. At 30, maybe we should call Dad and see what he thinks. At age 40, I'm not doing anything until I talk to Dad. And at 60, I give anything if he were here now so that I could talk to him. But here's my experience. The older I got, the smarter my dad was. And the verses that Larry read from us from Proverbs chapter 1, if you want to look there, it's all about obtaining wisdom. And God uses different methods to teach us wisdom. And one in particular, it says in verse 8, are dads. He says, listen to them, learn from them. And the result, he says in verse 9, is a father's wisdom will give us, it says, a lovely ornament to beautify our lives. Today we'd probably say a necklace that we never took off. And the rest of this chapter is just a voice of a godly father urging his son to listen to wisdom and obey what he hears. So that's what I want to do today, is give you some of the wisdom that my dad gave me. And by the way, this list could be absolutely endless, but I know you don't want to be here all day either. My dad taught me what it meant to be a leader. I mean, his responsibility to love his wife as Christ loved the church, as Ephesians 5:24 talks about. My dad knew his responsibility to teach his children about the Lord and live for them. And he was just obeying, way back in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 6. It talks about loving God with all our heart, all our mind, and all our strength. And he says, and you shall diligently teach your sons. And my dad did that. He not only taught me about God's Word, most importantly, he lived it. And he made sure, one thing I guarantee you, he always made sure that we were at church services. I never will forget, on Monday mornings at school, everyone was talking about the wide world of Disney. And I never got to see it because it always came on at 6 o'clock. And we were at services. My dad left our family, a legacy. And it wasn't material things, it wasn't wealth, but it was a legacy of living for God. And especially, the last several years, every time he prayed, he would ask God that our family would continue that legacy. My dad served as a deacon, he served as an elder and a preacher. I'll talk more about that in just a minute. But the one thing I always remember is that he always had time for people. As an elder, he was a good shepherd because he smelled like sheep. My dad taught me what it meant to be a servant. Matthew 20:28, Son of Man did not come to serve, did not come to be served, but to serve. And I really believe that was probably my dad's motto for life. I mean, I saw it in our home, at his business. I saw it in the church. I mean, he taught me no matter what the circumstances we're in, any facet of life, God has placed us there to serve. And one thing that I learned from my dad, if you're a true servant, people are going to take advantage of you. But the amazing thing is that was always all right with my dad. I mean, I used to wonder, why in the world are you keep giving these people money? They're taking advantage of him. Everybody could see it. And there were even times, I admit, I used to think, is my dad being a doormat, letting all these people just run all over him? I asked him about it one day, and he said, I would do it all over again. Because that's what a true servant of the Lord does. He cares for people no matter the cost. It cost my dad money, but let's never forget, it cost Christ his life. He taught me what it meant to sacrifice. It's kind of mentioned a second ago, he gave and loaned money, I think, to half the people in Coleman. And here's where he got in trouble. He co-signed endless notes for a lot of people. And my mother threatened him that he better never ever co-sign another loan because he had to end up repaying the majority of them. So here's what happened. Several years ago, my mother was still living, and I was back in the library of their house where my dad had his desk. And I don't know why, but I was going through it, and I found some papers where he had co-signed a note for someone after he'd been threatened by my mother. I asked him about it, and here's what he said in all the wisdom. Whatever you do, don't tell your mother. That's wisdom, isn't it? And I realize there's some people who would probably think maybe he wasn't very frugal with his money because he gave so much of it away. But again, I asked him about that several years ago, and he said, I would do it all over again. All give some give all. And my dad gave all, but that's Christ-like. He was a man after God's own heart. Never any doubt in my mind about that. I worked side by side with him for 10 years, and you really find out about a person's character when you work with them for that long. Now remember, this is the oil field. And never once, not one time, did I ever hear my dad say a bad word. I never heard him raise his voice when being yelled at by these oil field people. And if you know oil field people, they've probably got the worst mouths of anybody. But he taught me in that Proverbs 15:1 that says, a soft, some versions say gentle answer turns away wrath. I'm here to tell you it works. Because I saw my dad do it over and over again. He taught me what it meant to have a sense of humor. Proverbs 17:22 says, a joyful heart's good medicine. Yeah, my dad can make the best of any difficult situation. And I mean, just somehow find the humor in it. In fact, the day I fell in the grave, my dad was the first person I called when I got back here. And the reason why is because I knew he would love it and just get a big kick out of it. And he always loved to joke around. I mean, he was always trying to, just lighten life. And I mean, I can give you examples all day long. Several years ago, he passed out and fell in his yard. He was probably about 80, and they had to get a wheelchair to bring him in. And when my dad called and was telling me the story, he said this. He said, "This must be what it's like to get old and get lots of attention." But even with his dementia, the last 10, 15 years, I'm thankful to God that he never lost his sense of humor. You know, last few years he'd call me and I'd answer, and he'd always say, "Your phone's ringing." There was a drought in Coleman several years ago, and he called and told me, he said, I think God needs a hearing aid. He's not listening to my prayer for rain. And just one more also, he told me a few years ago, he said the roads were so bad in Coleman, he said I had to quit drinking milk because when we drive on them, it'd turn to clabber. You know, sometimes, I believe maybe we are too serious about life. That we need to loosen up and enjoy life. In fact, let me tell you one more thing. Last year, I got a Father's Day card from him, and here is what he wrote. And by the way, let me preface it with this. I never referred to him as father. It was always dad or daddy. Anyway, he says this: "Glad you are my son and not my dad. Love you, your father." That was my dad. He taught me what it meant to be a loving dad. And he didn't just show me or tell me that. He showed me. He was a busy man running a company and all through the years, but you know what? He always, there's all kinds of examples. He always had time for me. A dad is loved because he gives his children the one thing they treasure most, and that's himself. My dad taught me what it meant to work and work hard. 1 Thessalonians 4:11 says, "Make it your ambition to lead a quiet and godly life, attend to your own business, and work with your hands." My dad worked in the oil field his entire life, and he owned A&W Oilfield Supply in Coleman, and at one time we had about 10, 12 employees, and we had these 3 different buildings, and the store and the shop, and then the place for used parts. And the thing was, my dad would come out to the shop and bust down pumps, swing a sledgehammer, or help us go lay pipe. He didn't have to. He could just stayed in the office. But he wanted to show us how to work. I'll give you one example about that. When my dad was 72, Landon and I went to Coleman to roof their house. It's a 2-story house, and all the roof is on the 2nd floor. It was 105 degrees. My dad wanted to help. My mother said, "You're not getting on that roof," after he'd already been up there. So my mom wouldn't let him back on the roof, so he decided that he'd carry the shingles up the ladder 2 stories for us. And he did. He taught me what it means to be a Bible student. Mom and Dad had a big house with lots of stuff. In fact, if any one of you needs stuff, you let me know. But of all the stuff that was in that house, there's only one thing that I wanted, and it's this right here. It's his Bible. And the reason why, and I know you realize you probably can't see it real well, but almost every page is just covered with notes. In fact, he had another Bible. This was his original one. He's got another Bible that has just as many notes in it. And let me tell you why. Why it's so important to me. You know, my Bible is filled with notes, but big deal, I'm a preacher. My dad had a real job like all of you. Yet he made the time to be a lifelong student of the Word of God. My dad taught me what it means to be unselfish. Several years ago, he was in the hospital with prostate cancer, and I told him, I've been praying for you. Then I asked him, are you praying too? And this is what he said. He said, I pray for my family daily, but I don't pray for my health. He said, I think that's selfish. I told him, I don't agree with that. And you know what? He never responded. And I couldn't help but think maybe that's because I'm selfish. Several years ago, when my mother was still struggling with all of her health issues, and yeah, I have her DNA, he told me he prayed one time, and I didn't know this for years, just a few years ago. He said he'd been praying, God, take all this sickness away from Bonnie and put it on me, he said. And I thought, wow, that is unselfish. And you know, my dad had never even been in a hospital bed until he retired. I mean, very few times he'd ever even been to a doctor. And then after, it seemed like the minute he retired, you know, he ended up prostate cancer, neck surgery, high blood pressure, and, a heart attack. And here's what he told me. He said, I think God answered my prayer. But then he said this, that's okay. That's okay. My dad taught me what it means to preach the Word. 2 Timothy 4:2, preach the Word, be ready, in season, out of season. You know, this is probably one thing that amazes me the most about my dad. Since I was probably 4 or 5, he always wanted to help some small congregation wherever we lived who couldn't afford a full-time preacher. So, I mean, for 55, 60 years of my life, he filled in somewhere and helped small congregations. And my dad, I can't even tell you how many, the other day we saw there stacked like that thick of funerals, he did through the years, and weddings. When we moved from Wichita Falls, and I was a 3rd grader, for a year, we would drive back to Harold, which Harold is 30 minutes west of Wichita Falls. And in the words of my dad, if you don't know where Harold is, you need to repent. I mean, in my dad's mind, all roads led through Harold, his hometown. But we went back we drove every Sunday for a year for him to preach for them. And he gave me a list just recently. And he preached at 13 places. He'd started filling in at Santa Ana, which, is just between Coleman and Brownwood in about 2001. And he said, I'll just fill in until you can find a preacher. And he was there for 15 years until they closed their doors. And, the last sermon that I heard my dad preach was October 18th of last year. And he preached on prayer. In 2011, I had a note. He told me that he had baptized 19 people just within our family. And that all began with his mother and dad in Harrell, Texas, when they were about the age of 60. And I know he baptized many more family members since then. And in fact, it was probably just a little over a year ago that we were in Coleman, and I helped him because he was having trouble getting in and out of the baptistry and all that, to baptize one of his great-granddaughters. And then to tell you my dad's influence. His nurse, the last 2 nights of his life, told him, "Sam, I don't know if you remember, but you baptized me." I'll always believe I had the best dad God ever made. He taught me about life. He taught me about the oil field. But most importantly, he taught me and our family about God. Even though my dad's mind was deteriorating the last few years, he was to the point where he could no longer remember some of our family members' names. In fact, we would have Christmas and he'd say, "Who are all? Where do these people come from? Who are they?" And he was at the point where he could repeat the same story, over and over again. But here's the thing that amazed me, because I was really concerned about him getting up a year ago and preaching. But you know what? He could still preach. And the one thing that told me what was in my dad's heart was when he prayed. Even with dementia taking its toll on his mind, if you ask him to pray, he could still pray the most beautiful prayer. The reason why? Because that's what was in his heart. He couldn't tell you what day it was or what he just ate. But his heart was hardwired with God. October 11th, as I mentioned to you, 2013, my mother passed away, and my dad, against my sister and my advice, my dad insisted, we're having her funeral on his birthday, October 14th. And I asked him, why? And he said, the best birthday gift I could ever receive is to know that your mother's in heaven. And today I'm 60, barely in my 60s, right? And at my age, I don't want any material stuff for my birthday. If you've already bought me something, I'll take it, okay? But there's only one thing that I want for my birthday, and I pray about it constantly every day, that what my dad taught me, and that all of my family, the Wilsons, the Greens, the Morgans, my sister's side, that we'll follow in my dad's steps and the legacy that he left. And that we'll give our life to Christ and be baptized and be people after God's own heart. And leave a godly legacy, just like my dad did, for the next generation. And there's a Casting Crown song. I'm sorry I'm going a little over. I'm just almost done. In fact, there's 2 Casting Crown songs. I want to mention one of them. And I struggled with it for a while because it's called I Don't Want to Leave a Legacy. And it says this: I don't want to leave a legacy. all I want is for them to remember Jesus. I don't care if they remember me. Only Jesus. And I struggled with that for a while because I thought, well, I want y'all to remember me. I'm getting old. I'm not a spring chicken anymore. Deanna, I thought we're fall chickens. And then the next one left is not good. So, but, truth be known, you think about it. Maybe 3 generations from now, they're not going to remember me. It breaks my heart to know Bentley will probably not really remember my dad. But, you see, if we leave a godly legacy, they're not going to remember me, but they're going to remember Jesus. I want to read this. This is one of those things that I wanted to read at my dad's funeral, and I couldn't, so I didn't. But it's back to Casting Crowns, and it's a song. It's their new song just came out, and it's called Scars in Heaven. If you haven't heard it, you need to listen to it. But I want to read you just a few of these words, and then Drew, you can come lead us in a song. But the song says this, and this is not all the song, the majority of it. If I had only known the last time would be the last time, I would have put off all the things that I had to do. I would have stayed a little longer, held on a little tighter. Now what I give for just one more day with you. Because there's a wound here in my heart where something's missing. And they tell me it's going to heal with time. But, listen to this, I know you're in a place where all your wounds have been erased. And knowing yours are healed is healing mine. The chorus goes like this. I'm not going to sing it. Don't worry. I knew I should have brought Kleenex. The only scars in heaven, they won't belong to me and you. There will be no such thing as broken, and all the old will be made new. Thank you, because I can't even see this. And I like this right here. The thought that makes me smile now, even as the tears fall down, is that the only scars in heaven are on the hands that hold you now. There's not a day goes by that I don't see you. You live on in all the better parts of me. Until I'm standing with you in the sun, I will fight this fight. In the race I will run. Until I finally see what you can see. I thank God for all that my dad taught me. I had no intention of us coming here and crying today. I mean, you want to be uplifted here, don't you? Not cry, but I hope you will leave here and I hope what you have done today is thought of your dad, or of your mother, or someone that is close to you, and the things that they've taught you. And that's what I want us to leave here today on a bright note. God has my dad in heaven, but he'll always be in my heart.
Savior, he can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save.